So this is called, when this happens, when the baby is born in the amniotic sac, it's called a veiled birth. So when your mother gave birth to you, delivered you, her veil was rent.
That is so good.
Isn't that cool? And it looks just like a tree.
That is incredible.
Just like a tree. So one side is the tree, the other side is attached to the mother.
All right.
Tree.
Hold on a second.
It's called a veiled birth. This is not a Latter-day Saint thing. This is just standard midwifery. Now turn on your temple ears. The tree of life is connected to the baby through the navel. When your mother had you in her womb, that tree of life was supplying you with all of those things. Coincidence? I think not.
You got my brains wheeling.
You got the gears
My
turning.
brain's wheeling.
Well,
my gears are wheeling.
So, hear me out. I am convinced, personally, that when we say born again, we're not just talking about baptism. We're talking about the temple. That the entire temple is a symbol of woman. Okay, so I'm really excited about this. This is something I've thought about for a while, and I'm sure I'm not the first person to think about it. But it's the first time on Ward Radio. So here we are. Here we go. And this is not where my testimony lies. My testimony is in Jesus Christ. This is just kind of a fun little extra credit side tangent. So I don't know about you, but every time I go to the temple, I discover how many layers there are. And I think I've got it figured out. And then suddenly I get my mind completely blown and I see everything differently. And it's amazing. It's so amazing. The temple is so cool. So this is just one of many ways that you could look at the temple. And I think it helps me personally to see more of the woman's story in the scriptures, in the gospel, and in the temple. So this is a story about us. That's very fitting that we're here on Word Radio Women to talk about women. So I'll launch right in here with a hot take. So when you hear me say the words born again, what comes to mind?
Evangelical Christians.
Okay. Yes, they like that a lot.
I mean, baptism, but also birth.
Baptism, right? We talk about baptism as being born again. Evangelical Christians often refer to it as that moment when Christ came into your heart. We talk a lot about being born again as being baptized. And why is that baptism? I'm getting into primary answers here, guys, but bear with me. It's going to get fun. So why is being born again baptism?
Well, in the scriptures, it talks about we are buried with Christ and then raised with him in the resurrection. So it's like a new life in Jesus Christ.
Mm-hmm. Death and resurrection.
Also a spiritual rebirth where we had a physical birth and then a spiritual rebirth.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So it's both the spiritual rebirth of us when we're in our earthly state where our spirits are transformed, but then it's also pointing us forward to the time when we're resurrected. So very cool. In John 3:3-7, this is when Christ is talking to Nicodemus, and Nicodemus says, whoa, are you saying, he says, except a man be born again, he cannot see the kingdom of God, right? And then what does Nicodemus say?
I have to crawl back into the womb.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Does that mean I have to go back into my mother's womb? Like,
yes. Can you imagine Jesus just kind of being like, oh, like, okay, no.
You missed it.
Well, here's the thing. Here's my hot take. Are you ready? He doesn't say, oh, you silly man. That's not what I mean. He says, verily, verily, I say unto thee, so except a man be born of water and of the Spirit. So he's not saying, no, you're wrong. He's saying, yes, exactly. So hear me out. I am convinced personally that when we say born again, we're not just talking about baptism. We're talking about the temple. So there's baptism where the whole thing is combined into one ordinance where we die and are resurrected, we're born again. But then we go to the temple and it's all pulled out into all of its glory, all of its gory details, all of its story, all of its little tiny symbolism and all of these things that come into it. And so my hot take is that the temple is a birth story. So hear me out. I have a picture. Oh, I'm just going to jump to one of the good ones. So when your mother gestated you in her womb, she created a world. Do I have a picture of a woman as a world? I think I do. So she created a world for you to live in for a little while. We were all cozy in there in our little world. And universally, women are described as the earth is described as feminine. Mm-hmm. Mother Earth, right? It's a feminine. Mother Nature, exactly. It's where things are planted. It's where it's home. It's untamed rage. It's woman.
Even like my mother country.
Yes. Mother. So even the burying of death can be symbolic of mother. And then the water that we're born from is in this world that's created for us. So the water of baptism is inside of a woman. So even though there's a man officiating a baptism, that water is symbolic of women. That's what that's symbolic of. So we are the water, or our divine mother is the water. The earth is a divine representation of woman. And so when our mothers, I'll say it like this, our mothers gestated us, they grew an organ that they only have when they're growing a baby. And it's called a placenta. Now, we probably never heard of that before, the placenta that grows inside of a mother's womb. It has a nickname. Does anyone know what its nickname is?
No.
This is not a Latter-day Saint thing. This is not even a Christian thing. This is just generally understood in midwifery and
I have
OBGYN.
to ask if you're like a doula.
No. I just love birth. I love birth.
I would so hire you as a doula.
Yeah, me too.
Maybe someday that might happen. I loved my births so much, but no, I'm not a doula. But the nickname of the placenta is the tree of life.
I think I've heard that.
So now look at this picture. Pull up these. I have two pictures we can see in the Discord. This is the placenta, guys. This right here. Can you see it on if you're on Zoom, look at it on your phone. There's the veins in the placenta, and then that little cord coming down is the umbilical cord. So that connects to the baby. And it looks just like a tree.
That is incredible.
Just like a tree. So one side is the tree, the other side is attached to the mother.
All right.
Tree.
Hold on a second. So baby partaking of the tree of life then has to be, well, no, it's not the tree of good and evil.
No.
I was going to say if it's not good and evil.
Not the tree of good and evil. This is the tree of life.
Okay.
There's two trees.
Carry on.
Yeah. Two trees. This one's the tree of life.
Okay. Keep going.
So, what does the placenta do? It has many functions, but one is respiratory. So the baby's underwater, it can't breathe. So the placenta gives oxygen, which is respiratory. And the word inspiration actually means to inspire or to breathe in. So inspiration comes from the tree of life. Also, the placenta takes care of excretion or all of the waste from the baby. So it's cleansing the baby's body through the placenta. So it's inspiration and cleansing. It's nourishing. It gives nutrients. It also gives immunity. So any antibodies that your mother had when she had you in her belly were given to you through the placenta, through the umbilical cord. And so you have antibodies from your mom that she gave you to protect you against evil or germs or sickness, right? So but in the case of this story, we've now got protection from evil, And the last thing is the endocrine system, which is like the hormone system. So it sends messages. It's time to stay pregnant. It's time to have to give birth and all of these kinds of things. So when your mother had you in her womb, that tree of life was supplying you with all of those things. Coincidence? I think not. I think not. And then, okay, get this. Where is the tree of life connected to the baby?
The navel.
The navel. Now turn on your temple ears. The tree of life is connected to the baby through the navel. The source of inspiration, of cleansing, nourishing, protection from evil, and receiving messages is connected from the tree of life to the navel. And I'm not going to say anything more about that because I'm going to make you feel uncomfortable. But I think that's pretty cool. So far, am I crazy? Is this interesting?
You've got me thinking. I'm like, oh my gosh, is the umbilical cord the iron rod? And when that got separated, I went into the dark and dreary world, like Earth, like it's all symbolic. Like, you got my brains wheeling.
You got the gears turning.
My brain's wheeling.
Well,
my gears are wheeling. Yeah.
Even the protection that Adam and Eve have between them and the tree of life is a sword, a flaming sword that cuts us off from the presence of the tree of life. So we are in a state where we're not supposed to be fully in the presence of God yet, right? We're between, the umbilical cord has been cut for us, but we're on our way back for a new birth. Anyway.
I have a quick question.
Ooh, yeah.
So I haven't been able to experience this yet of growing my own placenta, but I was part of one because my mom gave birth to me. I sure was.
And honestly, most people who've done it don't even remember it. So we're all on the same page here. I don't currently have a placenta inside of me. So we all are just women carrying around wombs. That is who we are all together.
Right on.
But yes, what's your question?
Here's my question. We always regard the temple as a sacred space, not secret, not private, but sacred. And there are some details that occur in the temple that we don't discuss in public. I'm curious for the women who have given birth on earth. Were there elements of your birth story that are so sacred to you that you don't want to discuss? I'm not asking you to disclose those details, but I assume that there must be some type of sacred element of giving birth.
That's such a good question.
Wait. Can I jump into this?
Please.
So I have 2 children. My first child, we had some medical urgencies, and I was actually put under general anesthesia for delivery. So I was not there for birth whatsoever. And fun fact, my mother-in-law held my firstborn before I did. And I still love her. It's totally fine. But I didn't get any of that birth experience. With my second child, I had a VBAC, a vaginal birth after cesarean. And it was so powerful. And I came out of that feeling like, whoa, I can do this. I can go take on the world. Like, let's go. So to answer your question, Megan, yeah, I think there definitely is something about experiencing birth that is formative and spiritual and really, really special.
Thanks for sharing.
I was just trying to survive. I got to be completely honest. I don't really remember anything sacred, but I remember a lot of yelling, and I think I remember a lot of pain. And then I had a baby, and then I had to go to the bathroom, and that was an experience, and I couldn't feel my legs. So,
well, also that,
I don't know.
So you weren't examining your placenta? No? Well,
okay, fun fact. When I gave birth the first time, my placenta was in the shape of a heart. So isn't that cute? Yeah.
That's sweet. Oh, apparently they're all a slightly different color.
Ooh.
Like one of mine was kind of lavender. One of them was kind of magenta. All kind of a different color.
That's cool.
Well, when I gave birth the first time, my husband was looking into my guts. So there's that.
Yep.
I will say, like, I had this moment in my labors where just kind of continuing on with the kind of the temple parallel and how the temple, everything symbolizes the atonement. I remember having, I think that labor is probably the closest living symbol to the atonement of Jesus Christ that we have on this earth, because I remember, so my labors tend to be really long, and I have Pitocin, which means that it makes the contractions extra painful. And there was a point where my baby was going to get stuck. I did have a doula, and she was just like, you have to push or the baby's going to get stuck. And I remember thinking in my head, is there any way that I can get out of this? And and later reflecting back on it, I remember that's exactly what the Savior said when he was suffering for our sins. And when he realized that the only way to save us was to go through the atonement, that was what motivated him to go through the whole thing. And I remember thinking, what would motivate a woman? What would motivate a woman to go through the misery of pregnancy and the horrible pain of labor if it really is the love of that child? And so I think that labor in many ways is a spiritual gift that's given to women to experience a tiny portion of what the Savior experienced in the atonement for the whole world. Because truly, what would motivate you to go through that, something so awful? And yes, we do have modern medicine. Like, I know there's a lot of ways that it's not, I don't want to be overly dramatic, but I think it's the closest thing to the atonement that we have to parallel the world.
Yeah, well, and to bring it back to all women, not just those who have experienced childbirth, I think when Mother Eve said, "Is there no other way?" she wasn't just talking about childbirth. She was talking about the experience that we need to do in order to be able to carry the title woman, right? The experience of having a womb requires a monthly sacrifice, right? An involuntary one. And it's the sacrifice that prepares the way for deliverance. And so I think all women participate in that experience, and that's part of what makes us woman. And so we're all part of that story with Eve.
Quick question, controversial question.
Ooh.
Would you ladies feel like you disappointed God if you didn't have children?
Isn't there a promise in the millennium, though, that like those who are faithful in this life and keep their covenants and desire to have children, as like couples or single women, will be given that that promise it's a promise. Now I feel like I need to look it up, that women or men and women who, and obviously men who keep their covenants in the millennium, they will have the opportunity, or people who lose their babies. And I learned this from a friend of mine who had a stillborn birth, or baby was born and died in labor, so the baby was alive for a few hours. The promise is that you will be able to have those babies and raise those babies. So it seems like maybe you could flip that and say that it's more, instead of something, an obligation that you maybe failed to do for God, it's actually a promise he's made to you based on your desires, which is a good desire. And I mean, especially if you meet like anyone who struggled with infertility, like that is the purest, most wonderful desire that I think comes from God. So I think that's a different way to look at it, is that even though the actual experience of it is probably much more painful than just, but I think it's comforting to know that doctrine.
Well, and maybe this is, I'm not sure exactly what your question is, maybe, but I think ultimately our most important title is child. And in the temple, I would say we don't go through a mother role in the temple. We go through a child of a divine mother and father role. And so I would say our most important identity is actually not parent, it's child. And so would I feel like I disappointed him? I don't know if I've thought that through. I think I had the opportunity and took the opportunity, but I think there are many beautiful sacrifices that are made by women that aren't tangibly, birthing their own children, that are beautiful, righteous, wonderful things that Heavenly Father would be so proud of and is so proud of. And so I think there's so many right ways to do this life. And our most important identity is child.
I was trying to find it and I can't, but there was a talk that I read recently that related to that. And she just, like, I could totally see how it would feel that way. And I could see how that could cause a lot of pain for anyone, whether you can't have kids for whatever reason, or whether you have a couple kids and can't have more kids for whatever the circumstance may be. But I think it just all comes back to the atonement, and trusting that all things will be made right through the atonement. And that can bring us all peace, whatever it is we felt like we missed out on.
Did we capture the essence of your question, Megan, or are we way off?
You did. Thank you for following up. I appreciate it. The question really was if you felt like you failed God by not giving birth to children. Because the temple is the most sacred place we have on earth. And I love the concept of this episode relating women's earthly birth stories to the story of the temple. I think that's beautiful and it's sacred. But I have to be honest, the question came up in my head. So are those that have not experienced a birth story, are we lacking? But the way that you answered my question was so compassionate and graceful. And I especially loved what you said, Tikla, when you said, focus on being a child of God. That's just as important. And I really appreciate that.
And I would say that is the story of the temple that I'm referencing. It's not a story of becoming mothers necessarily in the temple. It's the story of, we are in the temple, which is a woman. So we're essentially going into a womb to have this experience. And I have tons more examples of parallels to where I think this is true, but all of them include us as the child in the temple, as the baby, as the cozy baby inside of a womb, right? Yeah. Which, baby, that's so weird, guys. Am I crazy? But
because I'm gonna go out on a limb.
Let's be real, the temple's so cozy.
Yeah. Well, sometimes.
Fallen asleep a few too many times.
I'm gonna go out on a limb and just kind of say, like, I think we can all relate to the story because we've all been born.
Mm-hmm. Right.
You know, like, so I think that's where, like, Tikla, what you were saying is, picture yourself as a baby, going through that process. We don't remember it, like the veil, but yeah. Okay, keep going, Tikla.
Okay, the veil is a great one. Should we talk about the veil?
Yes.
Let's do it.
So in birth, there is a veil. So, and maybe the easiest way to describe this is, well, I won't go there. But so you know how inside your mom, when you were inside your mom, you were in amniotic fluid inside an amniotic sac. Mm-hmm. So the amniotic sac is within your womb. And when the water breaks, or the bag of waters is what it's sometimes referred to, breaks, then that membrane is torn. And then the water comes out and the baby begins to be born. And so but sometimes the baby is born, it's very rare, the baby is born in the amniotic sac.
So that happened to my friend.
Did it?
Yeah, my friend. The baby, it was the 13-pound baby, and it came out full staff. Holy. And the whole staff from the hospital came because it happens, but it's rare. And so the baby's rare. Sleeping full, but I don't know how she did
fully
that.
There's a picture. There's a picture in the Discord of this. And it's kind of hard to see, but if you're looking at it, if it's pulled up now. So there's the baby's head, and there's a little hand, and it almost looks like he's in a little like bag, like a little balloon. You see that? So this is called, when this happens, when the baby is born in the amniotic sac, it's called a veiled birth. It's called a veiled birth. This is not a Latter-day Saint thing. This is just standard midwifery practice that is what that's called. And it looks like, especially once it bursts, once the amniotic sac is over the baby, it looks literally like a wedding veil that's on this baby's face. So we had to go through a torn veil to come into this world when we were born. So whether that's the moment of forgetfulness or not, it's symbolically represented inside a woman's body. And when does it happen? Right before we are delivered. And what happened in the temple when Jesus Christ delivered us, when he was crucified on the cross? What happened in the temple?
The veil was torn.
The veil was rent. So when your mother gave birth to you, delivered you, her veil was rent.
That is so good. Isn't that cool? Yeah, this is very neat. This is very neat.
So I don't know if you guys have been in on any of the controversy. This was maybe happening more when I was in college. And it still happens, I think, where women will go to the temple and they'll have mixed feelings about being wearing a veil. And I have a clip from Mormon Stories where there's a sweet woman who's sharing her story of going through the temple, and it was not good for her. It was not a great experience. And some of that was because of the veil. And I think I gave a timestamp that we can start it at because it's a little bit long. But if we start at minute 2:07, and we can listen to really her experience, and it has to do with the veil, or the veil that women wear in our robes of the holy priesthood.
And have an eyeslit, like it's just really just white blobs. And so it was just such an unsettling thing. I just kept looking over at the men and seeing the individuals, and then looking at the women and just seeing blobs, and then back at the men and back at the women. Like
they're literally faceless.
Yeah.
Wow.
I felt erased in a way, just we're not individuals anymore. Like, who knows who that is, but you do know for the men because you can still see them.
I've never thought about that.
So John Dehlin in this situation, he's talking with her and he validates her feeling of feeling erased. And I just want to give this woman a hug so bad. And I hope she can watch this episode and see woman in the temple. Because if you have a veil inside of your body, who more fitted to wear the symbol of the veil than the woman? And I would say for any young girl looking forward to her marriage, the idea of wearing a veil is very romantic and exciting and beautiful and special. But I would say even more so, anytime something is veiled, it's a representative of a sacred, godly presence. So whatever is behind the veil, whether that's the divine presence of the womb before entering earth life, or beyond a veil into the presence of God, or behind a veil as a woman, that is a symbol of the presence of God. In my, this is just Tikla speaking. I don't know. I wouldn't preach this and really study at church, just in the Word Radio room. But I have come to believe, go ahead, Rachel.
So I would encourage, I really can't, I've given this book away to so many people. It's called Soul Sacraments. It's by Alonzo Gaskell, and he's a professor at BYU. And what I like about him is that he was a Greek Orthodox and he joined the church. And I don't know if you've ever been to a Catholic church where there's a lot of like items and ornaments and things and statues. Greek Orthodox churches are so incredibly cool because it's like a pack rat's dream. Like, if you go to a Russian Orthodox church or a Greek Orthodox church, it's just and what you find with Greek Orthodox people is that they have a deep understanding of symbolism. It's like we see symbolism with one dimension and they see it in 3D. Like, they see symbolism everywhere. They see ritual with so much symbolism. And one of the things that he talks about in this book, so it's Alonzo Gaskell, is he talks about the veil as a sacred symbol for men and women in so many different religions. So in many religions, a veil type covering over the head is used for all kinds of priests. It's a symbol of priesthood for men and women. And so in the temple, it's a symbol of sacredness. Also, the top of the head is the highest part of your body. And so it's the closest to God. And so I just think I would encourage people to read that book because it also helps you be not so limited. It comes back to the story you started with, Tikla, at the beginning of Nicodemus. where Jesus is trying to teach symbolically and the people are thinking so linearly in such a flat way that they're like, how do we baby born? And I that's kind of what I hear. And I think it's very normal to be overwhelmed if you go to the temple. I wasn't, but I had several friends that were. That's why I think it's helpful to have a symbolic guide for you. The friend that I know who had the most awesome first time experience in the temple was an art history major. She was an art history major because all she saw when she went through the temple was artistic symbolism everywhere she went. And so that's another thing about the veil, is that the veil is a symbol in Jewish customs, and you definitely see it in the Russian Orthodox Church, is you see kind of veil type head coverings on priests. And it's a symbol of priesthood as well. So there's that.
Gotta be honest, I was one of those that went through for the first time, and I was completely overwhelmed, and I was just kind of looking around like, can I go back to sacrament meeting? Like, I don't know if I like this. But also, like, with the veil, Tikla, I'm loving this episode because you're making me, like, think deep, and I often don't do that, but I like this.
Meanwhile, I can't get in the real world. My family keeps calling me the weird wizard in the woods because they're like, okay, Earth Tikla, like, that's great, but...
The weird wizard, I like that alliteration. That's cool.
On-board radio women. No.
But like,
now.
With the veil, I like that, you know, Rachel, you brought up some good points too about the veil too. I don't know. I'm happy we don't have to veil anymore. I didn't feel like I was faceless, like that one, I don't know her name, that one lady on the John Dehlin episode. I didn't feel faceless. I didn't feel demeaned by having to veil. My problem with it was when I had to like pray out loud with the veil on, my hot breath got like stuck and it was like ricocheting back onto my face, and I was always just like I couldn't deal with it, and then that made me anxious, then that made me more sweaty, and it was a whole thing for me. So I'm grateful we don't have to veil, but not for the reasons that lady was speaking of.
Fair enough.
I'm embarrassed to admit,
but
I didn't even know that change was made. The last time I was at the temple was when I got sealed. And if you're new here, I got divorced 9 months later. Another story for another day. Nevertheless, I didn't know that it changed. What came to mind was one of our articles of faith that explains that we are a church of revelation. And how beautiful is that? That we are open to the fact that we are going to get new ideas. We are going to get new inspiration as to how to lead this group of people back to our Heavenly Father in Jesus Christ. So, one, I need to go back to the temple. Two, Tikla, I'm really thankful that you came up with this concept for this episode. Like Brittany said, it's making me think a lot.
Well, we need to do a Word Radio temple trip, huh?
Yeah, and Tikla's our spiritual guide.
Yep. So, okay, how are we doing on time? There's so many things we could talk about, but
We
that
might
might
have
be
to do
good.
a part 2.
Yeah, maybe a part 2. But I think
I would so be down for part 2. This is really good.
you guys are so great to humor me on this topic.
Well, what's so nice is like we do like a lot of times we talk about temple doctrine or we talk about temple prep, and it's usually a co-ed situation when so much of the symbolism, I think that is what overwhelmed me. Was the symbolism of the temple is so feminine, masculine, balanced out, and kind of it's so vivid in its symbolic nature throughout the temple and the artistry in the temple without saying too much. So it's interesting to get to talk about it in a positive way with a group of women, because I think that mentorship is important, because you can so easily because I think what's interesting about that John Dehlin clip is like, what is it? It's a man reinforcing how demeaning the temple is to a woman. Why isn't she talking to maybe another woman who can help her appreciate her own womanhood in the temple?
Well, and what kills me, and I'm sure John Dehlin, I'm sure has good intentions at some, I'm sure he's believes in what he's doing, but he so often will reinforce something that someone thinks that is an error and then say, yeah, God does feel that way about you, essentially. Yeah. And it just breaks my heart. So I'm like, guys, no, that's not the truth. And I know, but I've also been through it. Like in my journey from maiden to motherhood, I had a little period of time where I was like, what's the deal? Where are women? We're right. Like I couldn't find who I was. And it's been such a cool journey to find. And now I read the scriptures. I'm like, where are the men again? Oh yeah. Oh yeah. These are stories about men. Because the language of the scriptures is so feminine. Men, close your ears. You need to have it ruined for you, but so many words are women words, and we'll have to do a part 2. That'll be fun.
Part 2 and 3.
For now, just know that the entire temple is a symbol of woman. You have to be recommended to be able to be in that place. And so when you think of the temple, just understand that she's a woman.
One thing I would love to ask Megan is, because one thing you had asked Megan, like when you said, the question that you asked about, like, do you feel like you disappointed God if you don't have a baby, or whatnot, as I was actually thinking about how joining the church would completely reframe your paradigm, especially because you joined a little later in life. Like if I didn't have the gospel, I wouldn't have a paradigm that values having babies in this life, in this age. The way I would view it would be, so I would love to hear your story about maybe how joining the church changed the way you view being a woman, or being like, because it's a pretty phenomenal doctrine. Or
if it did, maybe you already had.
That's true. I don't want to put words in your mouth.
Yeah.
The question seemed like it seemed fitting. Yeah. For something like that.
I appreciate you even mentioning it. There were myriad reasons why I joined the church, one of which was the way that the church, in my mind, put mothers on a pedestal. I thought it was so beautiful. I was raised by my aunt. I saw my mom on the weekends. My aunt stayed at home with us, and I thought it was the most beautiful setup possible. And so when I found this community that really, really appreciated stay-at-home moms, that was one of the things that attracted me to the church, really. I've been a member for 8 years. I haven't had a baby yet. So way, way in the back of my head, there's this little file that I don't share with anybody, but I've shared with you guys. Sometimes I think, is God disappointed? I'm trying my best, I'm trying my best, and I'm not going to settle and bring a baby into the world with someone who I don't think is the right fit. But it's always in the back of my mind. Like, I was given this reproductive system. Time is ticking. Is God mad? Should I have settled? So that's kind of why I asked the question.
I really commend you for asking it too, because I don't know, you are going to represent a segment of the audience that's listening that feels that way, that doesn't feel comfortable sharing that with the people that they actually know in their real life.
Thanks, Rachel.
You know what I mean? It's true though. Like, people carry that pain around. I have 4 sisters, and only one of them has babies, and I know the other 3 sisters have that in their mind, and it's all how life is so complicated. And even if you have good answers, sometimes you still feel that way. But I think it would be, I'd love to hear that side of your perspective next time, because this is a corner of the internet where we can talk about how the gospel is actually validating to being a woman.
Totally.
It's actually, because I said to my husband the other day, because I've had some postpartum, like I was like, I literally feel like the only place I can go to feel good about being a woman right now is the temple. Because I feel like the world is just crapping on women. Like, there's no place that we're safe. There's no place that we're good enough. We have to be men. We have to be women. We have to be super moms. We have to be super professionals. I was like, I go to the temple because it's the only place that I feel like my womanhood is safe. So I don't know. We obviously have a lot we can talk about with the temple.
Part 2. Let's do it.
To kind of bring us home today, I have another thought on that clip. And then I think, Tikla, you said you had something else, and then maybe we tie it up for tonight and then go from there.
I like it. Go ahead, Joy.
Okay, to take it way back to that clip, when they were talking about veiling their faces and feeling kind of like a blob, this is something this is a hill that I will die on, that we understand a little bit of how men contribute. We understand there's a structure. There is the priesthood. With, they start as little deacons and then they move up, and you can kind of see how they contribute to the church. We can't really put a measurement or anything on how women contribute. It is far too nebulous to put it in a box.
It's a little bit more like art, right? It's a little bit more. Whereas I like to think of the women, the feminine, as the art, and the men as the frame around the art.
Yes, thank you, Tikla. But it's very clear, the little deacons, so the teachers and the priests and so on and so forth, and they have their whole structure. And for women, we don't have any sort of structure because we all contribute in such different ways, whether that's by childbirth, whether that's by nurturing, whether that's by creating some beautiful piece of art, whether that's by, having the emotional connection to be able to reach out and see others' needs. All of these things that you can't measure, they are not tangible, but they are so critical. And so I think that's part of why, maybe the women are veiled, or were veiled historically, because we don't know. We don't understand how it all works, but we know it does. Mystery. And that's why women are there. That's why we are still valued, even if we don't totally understand how it, even if we can't, put us in a cute little box and tie us with a bow. It's like, look, we know we need you here. We don't totally understand how all this works, but we know that women are needed.
That's interesting. Yeah. And I would say that is stating a reality of life, not imposing a reality onto women in the church, if that makes sense. Because sometimes it's framed as the church is trying to tell women that this is how their life goes, when I think there's a reality about the woman experience, and it's being referenced in some of this. It's the other way around. Anyway. So
not telling how it should be, it's explaining how it is.
Yes, exactly. You said that much better than I did. Okay, on a kind of lighter note, this is just like fun fact. We're going to go down a little rabbit hole here. In the Discord, get this ready. So I talked about a veiled birth, where sometimes, very rarely, a baby will be born inside the amniotic sac, and it's called a veiled birth. And there'll be a piece, especially on their head, that breaks away from the sac. That's this little piece of kind of gauzy skin. And so in old times, seafaring days, pirates would purchase dried cowls. It's called encowl when that happens for a baby. It would be dried, and they would take it as like a souvenir, as like a what's it called, an omelet, as like a good luck charm. Like then they would take it on their ship with them as like a good luck, so that they wouldn't sink. So the pirates would take these, and they would be called call bearers if they had one of these as like a good luck charm. Isn't that the weirdest thing ever? Look at that picture. It's like all dried up with a little plaque. It's so weird. So weird.
Okay, I don't feel so weird now for wanting to encapsulate my placenta and take it as vitamins.
Really? Did you do it?
I didn't do it, but I really wanted to. But no, I didn't do it.
Tree of life.
I think Cardin was over there in the corner like, if I did it.
Oh my goodness. Well, I love being a woman, and I love the temple, and I find divine femininity there so much. So thanks for letting me chat. We're going to have to do a part 2. Lots more to come on part 2. We can talk about symbols of femininity and masculinity and get a little deeper. I'm going to just be real careful and reverent, but I think we can explore some of these topics. If there's other parallels that you see to the temple and childbirth that I didn't touch on yet or haven't thought of, put them in the comments, because there's lots more discussion to be had there. And we'll do more of this soon.
Oh my gosh, Tikla, this was great. I'm going to have to like mentally prepare for a part 2. I don't know if my brain can literally hold all this awesome information anymore. Anyway, this was fantastic. Anyway, yeah, as Tikla said, drop any suggestions in the comments. Maybe we'll even have to do a live stream. I don't know. Anyway, for this and more, check out wardradio.com.